webinar series. As Nazim mentioned, this is the second one. And tonight's discussion, Sudan's proxy war, Gulf power, and the Zionist logic of extraction, really cuts down to examining how Sudan, as a representative of the African continent, has become the front line of a wider geopolitical project, which links Gulf power, Israeli security doctrine, and Africa's extractive landscape. So tonight we have a distinguished panel, all Sudanese who have, us come from different areas of civil society and media, as well as those who are very intimately involved in the political process. I think it's very important for us to understand that Sudan's war is not only internal, and we are looking forward to hearing how, the generations of colonial expansion that has seized resources and fragmented the state, how that has now been turned into geopolitical leverage. Two developments I just want to put out at the outset that we should be focused on as well, or that basically sharpen the stakes for tonight's discussion. That the first is that the UAE recently detained Sudanese civil society spokesperson Nadir Marioud. And Marioud is a leading voice of the pro-democracy resistance committee in Omdurman. His detention basically shows that the democratic forces and democratic actors in Sudan are not only targeted at home, as we've seen in the case of Sami Hamdi as well in the US recently. And the second development, as I'm sure everyone is well aware of, is Mohammed bin Salman's Washington visit, which basically is looking to leverage his personal relationship with the US to present Saudi Arabia as a responsible stabilizer. So as we analyze these dynamics, I think we must remember that we as South Africans anchor ourselves in Africa's own liberation tradition. And basically, as Julius Nyerere said, no African can be free while another people lives under occupation. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panel this evening. First of all, we have Brother Ramadan Ahmed, who is a political analyst, journalist, and editor. And we have Mekki Elmograbi, who is part of the Washington Focal Point organization, who has very deep knowledge of US-Sudan relations. Then we have Dr. Bashir Osman, who is actually the former chairman of the Gauteng Sudanese community. And this is very important when we want to understand how to support local efforts of ensuring solidarity. And our fourth panelist this evening is Dr. Amgad Fareid, who was a former aide to the Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, but is actually now associated with the Fikri Studies for Development. Good evening, gentlemen, and welcome. Assalamu alaikum. I would like to start with posing a question firstly to Brother Ramadan. Look, as we remember that the war that's currently raging has not come out overnight. It hasn't developed just since 2003. So could you explain to us how did the Janjaweed, which we understand were the original counterinsurgency militias, how did they evolve into the RSF, and how did they become one of the most powerful political and economic actors in Sudan?
Thank you so much, Sister Mariam, for having hosted us today. And we really appreciate this effort. It's an effort to make the story known in the Southern African region in particular, and in Africa in general, because what is happening in Sudan is something that has never happened in any African country. And when people hear about what's going on in Sudan, they think that it is like anything else that is happening or happened in Africa or will happen in anywhere in Africa. It is not like that. What happens in Sudan is something unique of its kind. And before I give you and the viewers and listeners, wherever they are, an idea about who these Janjaweed are, I need to caution that the issue of the RSF, or the Rapid Support Forces, which are commonly known as RSF, this issue is not handled with seriousness that it deserves in the African intellectual circles. Because, as I said, it's like any other, or people think it like any other revolution or any kind of rebellion that might have happened in any African country. And what happened there, it might be replicated in any African country. And this is the most dangerous part of it, because imperialist forces are ready to sponsor or to adopt any functional group whose objectives might converge with the objectives of the imperialist forces. And this is exactly what happened in Sudan. Coming to the establishment or the surge of the Janjaweed, in fact, these are not something new, neither even in the period of Umar al-Bashir. During the time of Umar al-Bashir, this group was established as something like it is like a backup, a paramilitary group for the army. The reason is during the rebellion of those rebel groups that have signed agreement with the Hamidok government, and now they are supporting the army, like Dr. Jibril, who is the leader of JIM, that is Justice and Equality Movement, and then Minnawi, who is now also the governor of Darfur, and other factions that are now part of the government. These groups rebelled in 2004, and they took arms against the government, the central government of al-Bashir by that time. They fought something like guerrilla war, and it was difficult for the army, being an official, because the movement of the army was not in line with the movement of the rebel groups, because they are very light in movement. So the idea of establishing this paramilitary group came to being, and the law was passed in parliament, and it was agreed. Of course, in any government which is controversial, the government of al-Bashir, of course, he came to power through a military coup, and then it carried on. But in that time, the parliament passed the law, and the RSF became that is the border guard. And then later on in 2013, that was the development. And then in 2017, it was integrated into the army. It had become a paramilitary group, which is affiliated to the army. But even before this development, and before the coming of the government of Bashir, these groups, or Janjaweed group, were Sudanese, local Arab Bedouins, who were used as functional groups during the government of Sadiq al-Mahdi, and they were called as Marahil. So they were used to fight the southern Sudanese during the war between South and North. So this group were used. So it is not new. But what was new is that it has now been legalized and taken a legal form. But the fact of the matter is that even after the paramilitary group was established and it was given legal status, and it was now operating as a well-controlled actually group, al-Bashir was not confident. He didn't have confidence in the army, which is why he gave a lot of authority to the RSF. RSF was in the sensitive, the vital areas in Sudan, like the radio and television station, the head command of the army, and even the Republican Palace, everywhere they were there, even the airport. One of the distinguishing things about this the group is that they were well controlled. This is number one. Number two, the group, the personnel was 20,000. So 20,000, and the arms were traditional arms, were not too sophisticated, meaning that they were not above the national army. So that was the status. Despite that, they were very dominant, actually, because the army, the national army, was marginalized by the government of al-Bashir for a long time. They did not recruit. The recruitment was stopped. And what happened is that when the revolution started, the people started demonstrating. It looks like the RSF did not intend to protect the regime. So they did not interfere in order to protect, although they in some part of the revolution, of the December revolution, they participated, and they killed some Protestants. But it happens that after the fall of al-Bashir's government, there was some kind of vacuum, political vacuum, because the new political forces were not strong enough to fill the gap. That's number one. And there was already military vacuum. So political vacuum, military vacuum, the automatic situation is that the RSF advanced and filled the gap. Now, what happened is that some regional forces thought it is high time for them to jump in and do some kind of utilization, this group as a functional group. And this is what's happened. So in the absence of political will or political forces, and in the absence of strong military institution, what happened is that the regional forces came in and they funded the RSF, and they doubled or tripled or even 10 times recruitment. The speed was very, very fast, let alone the type of sophisticated weapons. And these weapons actually were American weapons, which were given to the United Arab Emirates. No any power in the region had that kind of weapons. So the weapons got transferred to the RSF. Now,
Brother
the RSF
Ramadan, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt there. I would just like some
Yes,
clarification. You mentioned that it is it was due to the vacuum that was in place after the revolution or during the revolution. Can you explain to us why that was the case? Was there no traditional or even state administrative or institution that was strong enough in the Darfurian region to be able to continue with some kind of semblance of security? Why I ask this is because oftentimes people assume that they are just, it's just certain parts of Sudan. But I'm trying to understand that actually the state does not necessarily exist as a state.
Okay, this is a very good question. It's true that the state institutions were weakened. The revolution, what happened is that when the regime fell, now the revolutionary forces came to the system, and the institutions which supported the regime were now very weak, and this is where the catch. Now, Hemeti, who is the leader of the RSF, was really the main force. After he was, there are some kind of there are details that I don't want to enter into, but I just highlight some important elements in answer to your question. So state institutions was very weak, and Hemeti utilized this with the help of the new sponsors now, the regional sponsors, and he managed to remove all the military commanders who were against him. All of them were removed from the military. And his dominance was to the extent that he used to issue instructions to Al-Burhan, who is now the commander of the army. So Al-Burhan felt very weak, and even there are some ideas, or some people may think that Burhan was connived actually with him in some certain steps. But anyway, what happened is that state institutions were weakened, and Hemeti jumped in and filled the gap with the help of external forces and with the weakness of internal forces. This is exactly what happened. So he received equipment, very highly sophisticated equipment. He had the armored vehicles, the what do you call, tanks. The only thing that Hemeti didn't have was the airplanes, and he was already planning to do this. He already had sent some of the his elements to study how to study aviation. Some of them in Addis Ababa, some of them even in South Africa, and some other European countries. So he was preparing himself to have, in a nutshell, what I'm telling is, within this 2.5 or 3 years, Hemeti became a state within the state. He was completely dominant. Now, what happened is, when the war started as a result of a failed coup, nobody would ever think that he won't overpower the army, because the thousands of armored vehicles that attacked Khartoum, if it happened to New York or any of the Western capitals, it wouldn't have taken a few hours just to take over everything. So what happened is that the army stood its ground and used all the tactics, and they repelled the attacks. And then the war started from there. Al-Burhan himself was the target, and his house was attacked. 35 of his bodyguards were killed, and he narrowly escaped the killing. He was almost killed. So he escaped, and that's how things developed into that into that situation. So within the first 2 months, RSF controlled almost 80% of Khartoum state, and then the fight continues. The army used tactic, and then they were pushed to Al Jazeera. That is the central of Sudan. So Al Jazeera fell. Now most of the troops were moved to Al Jazeera and so on. So the army had to announce mobilization of civilians who would be able to serve as paramilitary. And many of the Sudanese people, they answered, the youth, they answered, and they formed their own brigades, and they fought along lines of the army, and they managed to expel the RSF from Khartoum, from Al Jazeera, and from central Sudan, and they push them towards Darfur and Kordofan. So parts of Kordofan at the moment are in the hands of the RSF, but the major parts are in the hands of the government, the major cities in Khartoum, in Kordofan. Darfur, there is one city which is still resisting, Baba Nusa, if you heard of this name, and there is Al-Fashir that has just fallen in the hands of the RSF. So at the moment, the entire Darfur is in the hands of the RSF, and the Banusa only the one in the hands of the government, and is still resisting. What I would like to say here is that some people may think that there is a kind of civil war. And I would like to say there is no civil war at all in Sudan. That's number one. Because what is happening now, the RSF with its elements that came from Niger, from Chad, and from Mali and West African nations, and some mercenaries, they are fighting as a force of aggression, a force of invasion. The Sudanese army at the moment is supported by the Sudanese people. This is the reason why those who are supporting RSF can in no way be able to go to Sudan or be able to address any gathering of a Sudanese group at the moment, whether inside Sudan or outside Sudan. And you might have seen some of them being, even the meetings that they wanted to convene, these meetings were attacked by angry Sudanese citizens who were living in diaspora or wherever, which indicates that the war, there is no civil war, there is a war of aggression, and the Sudanese people are standing strong behind the army. So if there is no civil war, meaning that there is no two parties. So sometimes there is a narrative that the two parties need to sit to negotiate, the two parties, or the two parties are receiving arms from different parts. Sudanese army is the official entity that is representing Sudan at the moment. So whether the RSF is there or not, Sudanese army is entitled to communicate with the world outside, to make friends in the context of bilateral relationships, to bring whatever in favor of the country, whether it is arms, whether it is goods for the people, whatever agreements that the army or the chief of the army can make an agreement with. So here we cannot say if regional forces are arming the RSF, now we assume that there are two parties, and then we say that regional parties also are funding the army. So the two parties to the conflict are receiving help from regional forces. This is a wrong narrative. It's not acceptable at all. So whether RSF is there, whether it is not there, the army still need to equip itself. The other thing which actually, yes.
Sorry, Brother Ramadan, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think it would be good if we just maybe move on to the next question, and then we can always return in terms of consolidating. But before I do that, one thing I would like to ask you is, do you think that this was actually the RSF's rise was kind of incidental, or do you think that it had something to do with the regional plans of other actors like Israel and the UAE?
Frankly speaking, in the region, we have functional states. Israel is a functional state. There's no question about it. And I'm hesitant to say that UAE is a functional state, but facts on the ground is confirming the opposite. And functional states and functional groups, they work together. And this is exactly what's happening in Sudan. The RSF is a functional group implementing the goals of functional states. So I have no doubt to say this. Yes.
Thank you so much, Brother Ramadan. We appreciate your perspective. And now let's move a little bit onto the question of the international perspective, particularly looking at Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. So here I would like to ask Brother Mekki to please join us and to give us some understanding of, firstly, the history of US-Sudan relations and what you think is particularly unique at the moment, considering that both the UAE and Sudan, UAE and Saudi are part of the Quad of countries that are supposed to be managing the peace process.
Thank you for Palestinian Solidarity Alliance. Thank you, Mariam, Nazim, and my brothers, Bashir and Ramadan and Amgad. My name is Mekki Elmograbi. I'm a former diplomat and a press writer in Sudan, and I act as a focal point regarding non-state actors in Sudan in connection with United States think tanks, mainly in Washington, D.C. I want to say that the relations between United States and Israel is well known, definitely by 100%. And currently, during the Trump time, U.S. is a sponsor of Abraham Accord in the first term, and now currently they are pushing for that again. When it comes to Israeli-United Arab Emirates relation, that something needs to be to have more focus. The relations between Israel and other countries has 4 levels. Zero relations, and that happening in some countries, just like Algeria. You can say that in Algeria there is zero Algerian-Israeli relation, even there is no negotiation on having relation with Israel. To some extent, Tunisia. The second level of relation is what I call it, or some people call it, cold normalization. It is normalization, but it is dry. Still, in the mentality of the government and the people, Israel is something cannot be a friend of the country or go in alliance, and that happening in Egypt, Turkey, South Africa. Some people arguing that it is cold, sometimes hot, because of some economic relations. The third level is hot normalization. And that is happening because of economic and cultural relation. The example is Morocco now. Morocco has kind of hot normalization because it is not just diplomatic ties. You have cultural ties, economic ties. But still, all these didn't reach the 4th level, which is an alliance. The relation between UAE and Israel is not friendship, is not cold normalization, is not hot normalization, is an alliance between the 2 countries. It is security and military alliance. And that is not said by me. If you just Google UAE Israeli alliance, you will find a couple of articles. The Deutsche Welle was the first, and they wrote Israel and United Arab Emirates, how the enemies became allies. And that is the start of the normalization between the 2 countries. The Institute for Palestine Studies in Ramallah, they published the new disorder, the evolving United Arab Emirates Israeli Security Alliance. Those are the people of the land in Ramallah. In the Institute of Palestine, they look at what is happening between UAE and Israel as a security alliance. The Washington Institute for Near East Policy in Washington, D.C., which is extremely pro-Israel, they said that the Israeli-UAE defense cooperation. It's a military cooperation and security cooperation between United Arab Emirates and Israel, and they stated in that paper saying that even amid the war in Gaza, both countries have also committed to working together to advance security and stability. The Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. also how the technology is cementing the UAE-Israeli alliance. So the word is alliance, security alliance, military alliance. That is the word you can describe the relation between Israel and United Arab Emirates. And that appeared clearly in the agreement between H Group, which is owned by the government of UAE, and the Israeli defense industries, which is owned by the Israeli government. They manufacture drones, and it reached the level that UAE bought or purchased 30% of Israeli company dealing with the technology of drones, and that happened in January. So it is not just agreement and cooperation. UAE is running business of manufacturing military drones inside the United States, and that's very, very sad, because they bought it in January 2025, and in September 25, you can read a news just like Israeli drones strike and kills children taking line for water in Gaza safe zone. So the drones that run and owned by both countries in their military alliance is killing Palestinian children. And now this alliance, and also, by the way, in the agreement between each group and the defense, the aerospace defense Israeli company, the president of the company, in the memorandum between the two countries, he said that this MOU serves as a stepping stone, further business and strategic alliance between the two countries. So what does that mean to Sudan? The mentality that managing and running the war in Gaza, the same mentality that is doing the same in Sudan. Taking people out of their lands, bringing other people from other parts of the world, putting them and settling them in the land of other people, killing, mass murder, killing children, the same mentality. In the eyes of African people, the only continent that has a charter, say African, the Charter for Human and People's Rights, the African Charter, stating that the Zionism and the apartheid are form of occupation and colonization. So all African countries agreeing on the word of Zionism and pointing finger to Israel as occupation power. And now we have a new ally with Israel practicing the same occupation in the lands of Sudanese people, pushing mercenaries from the Sahel region to occupy the areas of the people of Masalit and Zagawa and For and Midob and Berti and others. And by the way, even the Arab people are facing the same, because when the mercenaries of the nomads came from outside Sudan, if they find an opportunity, they take even the lands of the Arabs in Sudan. For me now, what is happening in the United States and the promise of Trump for Abraham Accords is pushing again the same thing, to legalize what is going on in Darfur. And by the way, when the government of Sudan rejecting the negotiation, they are differentiating between two kinds of negotiation. A negotiation to end the war or to end the militia, and that is accepted. And negotiation to legalize the militia, and that is rejected. The same happening in the Palestinian case. They offer you negotiation for what? To dissolve and to end the Palestinian existence on Palestine. But the negotiation accepted by the Palestinians is that the two-state solution, the negotiation on people returning to Gaza and others. But from the Israeli side, the negotiation should lead to take the Palestinians out of Gaza. I just want to suggest something. The people in the United States, in Canada, in UK, in Europe, in Australia, and in other parts of the world, what is happening now, or what is the solution now that they are making to help Sudanese people? Demonstrations and solidarity stand. My suggestion that South African, who taught us the freedom, and we thank them for their stand for the Palestinian rights and learning from their experience, just push for demonstrations against what is happening in Sudan in front of UAE embassies and other UAE existence in South Africa as a country, and in South Africa as a region, and in Africa as a network that you have in connection with other African countries. Also, I need to mention Nigeria in a danger. Nigeria also has a security cooperation with Israel. For what? Against or to counter terrorism. And what is happening now, the terrorism is getting stronger in Nigeria. How you can bring people to counter terrorism, and the results is that you have more terrorism. And what is happening now in the very sad events between Muslims and Christian and church, and that will be an excuse for US to intervene in Nigeria. Who is running all these things behind the scene? Who is running another plot against Algeria? And then Algeria, they dismissed or they kicked out one of the or some of the Emirate diplomats. So my suggestion, because we need something to do, not just to speak and to talk. Solidarity stands submitting memos to United Arab Emirates embassy and demonstration to increase the level of the awareness of South African as a region and African about the evil role of United Arab Emirates in Sudan, and that is connected with what is happening to the people in Palestinian lands. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Brother Mekki. That was really powerful, and I think you've raised some extremely important points. I would like to perhaps ask you about, what we see in the media is, as Brother Ramadan also said, perhaps this idea of a civil war, but there's always this reporting of Arabs versus Africans. And in doing some of my research for this webinar this evening, I came across some articles that suggested that, the Zionist influence goes right back to the early 30s, 1930s and 40s in Africa, where actually, even as you suggested in Nigeria, Christian-Muslim relations were manipulated by the Zionists in order to create that sense of tension. Can you give us an understanding of what it means to be Arab in Sudan? Because I think, most people speak Arabic, most people are adherents of Islam in the north. How do we make a distinction, and is it necessary to make that distinction? And how does a distinction serve us, or does it actually make collapse the political issue into something quite different?
Also, I think that the Palestinian Solidarity Alliance, they have chosen the right word, the Gulf power and the Zionist logic of extraction. Because we are against Zionism, not Judaism. Because Zionism is a secular movement hijacking a religion, which is Judaism, and turning it to an evil power of occupation. Based on that, the idea of changing religion to occupation power, it is a mentality. And they came to the Arabs in Sudan. And sometimes you cannot find a big difference in the skin. Even for us Sudanese, not for you. You can have someone from the Arab tribes or for other tribes that classified as not Arab because they have their own native language, not because they don't speak Arabic, but because they have their native non-Arabic language that they speak till now, or they don't speak. But one day they have their own native language and culture, which is deep-rooted in Africa, in the area, and to some extent also mixed with Arabs. But the others are nomads, pure Arabic language, and maybe it is just a matter of language, because when you go to the Sahel region, some of the tribes there, they lost their language and they start to speak Arabic and they became Arab by language. So the people that they made the Zionism out of Judaism, they can make Janjaweed out of Arab. They can come to South Africa and they can make a mixed kind of xenophobia mixed with Asian things, and then they can bring for you a version of Janjaweed in South Africa. It's a mentality. So don't try to spend time to differentiate, because there is no difference. When it comes to Sudan, maybe people of Darfur, the region, could understand the slight difference between tribes there. Some of them, they look at the features, they can distinguish. But also, when you go to the same part of the tribes, which classified as Arab tribes, you go to other part of the tribe, you find the same features that you find it in the non-Arabs. So the colonization in Africa is making hell of problems with nothing. In the Cameroon, there is a war in Cameroon between who? Between the Anglophone and the Francophone. So the African are fighting after classification of the languages of their colonial masters, the Anglophone and the Francophone. Nothing, the same tribes, the same people, the same country, but the difference in language. And even if it is not an African language, it is English and French. So, Sister Mariam, the mentality of the Zionism is making problem all around the world. And they are creating the war. And this is what is said in Quran. كُلَّمَا أَوْقَدُوا نَارًا لِلْحَرْبِ أَطْفَأَهَا اللَّهُ. They stir the war, or they flame the war, and then Allah is stopping it. So I hope that I answered your question. The exact things said by Ramadan, the issue of Janjaweed started with Marahil in the time of the third democratic period, and the minister of defense at that time was Fadlallah Burma Nasser, and now he is part of the RSF, what so-called government in Niala. He used to be the minister of defense who created the first or the zero version of Janjaweed in Sudan. And then mistakes happened during Bashir time, after 2019, and then it continued. And the misleading made Sudanese that minimizing the size of the problem. All people, they participate in the mistake. There are 3 levels of the Janjaweed, and this is what I'm telling Sudanese people now. The creation of the Janjaweed, and then the expansion of the Janjaweed, and then the war of the Janjaweed, or the war of April 2023. People in Sudan now, they are involving in trying to say who made the Janjaweed and who is responsible of the expansion. I'm always saying to them, now we are in the time of the war. Whoever fight against the Janjaweed, it is not the time to ask him about his role in the creation and the expansion. All of them participated, the political parties, the military, the Islamists, the secularists, all of them, they have participation in the creation and the expansion of the Janjaweed. But let us draw the line. Whoever fighting against the Janjaweed, who are killing and raping and mass murdering and burning villages and towns, he is someone who is standing with the Sudanese people and humanity. And whoever on the other side, he is the enemy of Sudanese people and the African people. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Brother Mekki. I think we can move on now. I do still have that question about Saudi relations with Sudan and MBS's visit to the White House, but perhaps we can talk about that after all the other
Let me
speakers.
just draw a point here, or say a point here, if it is possible. Saudi Arabia is totally different from United Arab Emirates, and you have now the Saudi-Pakistani alliance, military alliance. So if you look at Saudi Arabia, once they are so close to United Arab Emirates, and even in the start of the war, you cannot say that Saudi Arabia is pro-army by 100%. But I can assure you now, the situation is that Saudi Arabia and Egypt are so close or typical to the government of Sudan on the issue of ending the militia. When it comes to Israeli-Arab relations, that could be another topic to discuss. But in all cases, the only Arab countries that they reached the level of military and security alliance with Israel is UAE. And I don't think other country will reach that level. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let us move on now to Dr. Bashir Osman, who is the former chairman of the Gauteng Sudanese community. Welcome, Dr. Bashir. I would like to ask you a bit about, the weaponization of famine, and as we've seen, the humanitarian consequences of the war and the high level of displacement. Perhaps you can speak to us about what the actual strategy has been, and how does the control of humanitarian corridors and displacement routes, what does it reveal about this political economy of hunger in Sudan?
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum to all of you. And thank you very much to the PSA for the opportunity and for organizing such in support of Sudan and Sudanese people, and in support of just causes as used to be, to do this timelessly. May I share some slides that I had prepared?
Please go ahead.
Isn't allowing you to share? Can you allow me? Can you allow me to share some slides?
Sure. Abdullah, can we fix that, please?
Yeah.
Dr. Bashir, I've just made you co-host. See if you can share now. Caribou, can we save questions for the end?
Yeah, I can see that.
Thank you.
Sharing. Here it is. Can you see that now? Is it shared?
Dr. Bashir, we can see it, but your mic is very, very faint. If you can maybe come closer to your computer.
That's fine, I can do that. But yeah.
We can see the slides.
Share,
Thanks.
because I don't see it shared now.
Yeah, it's there. We see your slides.
Is it shared now?
Yes, 100%. We can see your slide.
Yes, we can see it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but I don't see them myself.
You might have to minimize your screen.
All right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Good. All right. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the Palestinian Solidarity Alliance in South Africa. And I believe this is a timely symposium to talk about Sudan and what's happening in Sudan. Thank you to my co-panelists and to everyone on the podium. I'm sharing the map of Sudan, just to give some idea to those who are not very familiar with Sudan, where it is and what's going on there. So you can see that Sudan is on the western coast of the Red Sea, bordering Egypt, Libya, Chad, Central African Republic, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. When this war started on the 15th of April 2023, it started actually in the capital of Khartoum in central Sudan. And from the outset, for everyone from outside would see that it was actually a power struggle between two generals to control power in Sudan.
Yes.
That was not the case, and it was very clear from day two that the Janjaweed, rebranded RSF, are targeting everything that represents Sudan as a state, as culture, as people, and as infrastructure. They went on the rampage, destroying everything that the Sudanese people own. And during their campaign, they extended their war into central Sudan, where they went into these central states all over the places. And for 2 years, or almost more than 2 years, they were wreaking havoc in this region. That campaign of terror started with very clear message that they are not tolerating any indigenous population in Sudan. So they started in the very early days of the war in June 2023 by raiding the El Geneina, where they killed in 1 week 2,500 people. The same applied when they were in central Sudan, where they actually killed different numbers at different places, no matter what that place was, a city or a village or a township. That was the way they did, or they ran their campaign. And therefore it wasn't really surprising to find that by the time they came to Al-Fashir in Western Sudan, they actually applied all what they did before, but at a much higher scale. Al-Fashir is a historic capital of the bigger Darfur region. And for the last years, it became also the capital of northern Darfur. So it actually has a very special significance for all Sudanese and for all who actually wanting to have significant role in the Sudan and its politics. Al-Fashir remained one of the last army garrisons in Darfur after the militia had managed to control other major cities in the region. Since August 2002, or for the last 18 months, Al-Fashir had been under siege by the militia in order for it to gain control. That siege actually was getting tighter and tighter, and during which there was no boundaries to attack or to no sounds. Can you hear me? Sorry,
Doctor,
can you hear me?
Can hear you.
You can hear
it
me.
is very faint, but we can hear you.
Yeah, let me see if I can take off my. Okay, let me take off my camera. Maybe that will help.
It's fine.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. All right. So now, if we move to whether there was weaponized famine in Al-Fashir or not, let's first start by some definitions. That what is weaponized famine? Deliberate strategies in armed conflicts that cause or exacerbate existing or creating new famine by blocking access to food, destroying livelihood, looting food supplies, and sieging or besieging populations or preventing humanitarian assistance. In the next slides, I will try to show you that actually Al-Janjaweed has done all of those things. But as a baseline, the WFP define famine as at least 20% of households face extreme food shortage, or at least 30% of children under 5 with acute malnutrition, and or at least the death rate is more than 2 per 10,000 per day. These conditions are being all fulfilled in Al-Fashir during the siege of it. In fact, I heard from one of the medical personnel that in 1 week, actually, they would lose up to 60 children due to malnutrition. The combination of conflict, restricted access, and starvation makes the situation qualify for both crime against humanity, genocide, or war crime, given the targeting of civilians and the use of the siege tactics. So now we are in a situation where a city has been besieged for a long time, and everything was used to perpetrate the condition of weaponized famine. Al-Fashir was subject to RSF assaults and besieged for about 18 months before it fell late last month. And the UN-backed IPC's first determination of famine during the conflict was in Zamzam displacement camp south of Al-Fashir, and that started as early as August 2024. And the siege, food, basic supplies are blocked or were very expensive. Citizens were forced to extreme coping mechanisms, and we always heard about these coping mechanisms as people, cannot access what we call normal human feed, so that they actually, move to eat, animal feed and even animal hides. During the siege, residents were forced to eat animal feed and animal hides. I see there's a poll now. Is it blocking my progression? And anyway, now I can't move with my slides, but one of the techniques that were actually determined and were shown by the Yale University. What's going on here now? Humanitarian lab was the erection of what they call the kill box. They dug trenches around the city of about 31 kilometers, and from the earth that they took out, they made a sort of a wall. That earthen or berm used by the Janjaweed or the militia as a blockade for everything to come from outside in terms of humanitarian aid, convoys, and worse is to prevent people from leaving the city. I can show you that here. Yeah, here's the trench. You can see it here on the satellite images by the humanitarian lab. This wall that was done around the city, but you can see it here better on this BBC sketches that an all around trench or berm was built around the city to do two things: to prevent any aid to come in, and also to prevent people from leaving the city to outside. In fact, during the last days of the war before the fall of the city, sorry for that. That wall actually was used as a trapping mechanism. The Yale University called it kill box, and whoever want to leave would be actually trapped here and killed and probably buried there. So that actually another thing for the tactics to worsen the humanitarian or to worsen the famine situation. Al Jazeera reported that desperately people flowing roads and blocked roads also in the neighborhoods, consistent with the tactics of siege. And the visual help, and these visuals of the wall helps establish the severity of the situation and provide evidentiary basis for humanitarian and legal analysis of the massacre. During the time of the siege, people were actually merely remain alive depending on what we call takaya in Sudan, singular as takiya, and takiya is a community kitchen that would be run by volunteers in the neighborhood, and it mainly actually used to get supported by Sudanese in the diaspora. And like the campaign that is now we try to run here in South Africa to gather some support for this takaya. Now, especially this takaya now are in the displacement camps, so they are away from the Janjaweed intervention or the interference, so they are a little bit safe, and they are still continuing to provide support for the people. Also, during the time of the inflation, during the time of siege, normal stable food items such as sorghum or wheat were actually very expensive. So they went to almost 500 times the normal price in other parts of Sudan. In addition to that, there were repeated attacks on displacement camps around Al-Fashir. So it was actually a full-blown attack on civilians in Al-Fashir, and you can see this type of views that people actually were just gathered together and living in this very difficult situation. I spoke about that berm. So what are the humanitarian and legal implications of weaponized famine? The combination of conflict, restricted access, and starvation risks mean that the situation may qualify as both crime against humanity and genocide, sort of war crime. Health impact, malnutrition among children is very high. The lack of food, the infrastructure destruction, like marketplaces, hospitals, everything was collapsing, and there was lack for access of food and waterborne disease were rampant. The WHO warned that over 770,000 children in Sudan were expected to become malnourished. The majority were from Al-Fashir and Shamal and northern Darfur, and by the way, also in Kordofan, in the city of Bara and its surroundings. And also, humanitarian aid is severely constrained. The siege attacks on convoys and insecurity make it difficult to deliver food, water, and shelter. And that was reported by UN Sudan. And this is the result. Now we can see children, a child like this with severe malnutrition, with all the signs, medical signs of severe acute malnutrition are evident here. Does it matter actually? Does it matter? And why actually it should matter? A famine level crisis in a major urban center like Al-Fashir marks a grim escalation in the conflict. Previously, many famine declarations were made in rural or displacement camp contexts, but here the scale of the famine and the number of people who were affected and the length of time these people were exposed to such tactics and siege at the end, one can see that actually they were actually the aim was actually to force them to leave the city as part of the strategy of demographic change in this type of cities. When food access is being deliberately denied, then this is not a thing, but it's a humanitarian crisis, but also a matter of international law and see. The collapse of civilian infrastructure has long-term effects even after the hostilities stop. After the hostilities stop, recovery will take years, and intergenerational suffering and diseases will continue. Children malnutrition and its complications long-term on health and longevity of life of their children, and obviously the psychological trauma that people have gone through. The regional implications, mass displacement, spill over into neighboring states or countries, and the pressure on the humanitarian systems and international commitment. In this one, actually, I'm quoting what the chief of the human rights, the UN Human Rights Organization mentioned when he was reporting to the last meeting in Geneva. The atrocities that were seen unfolding in Al-Fashir were foreseen and they were preventable. And in fact, the UN and the Security Council has issued a statement asking Al-Janjaweed to stop sieging Al-Fashir, but without any action. So they continued disregarding whatever came from these international organizations. The UN Human Rights Office itself issued 20 statements about the strangulating and suffocating siege, under which people were reduced to eating animal feed and peanut shells. The fall of the city would result, and what they were expecting, that the fall of the city of Al-Fashir would result in a bloodbath, and that happened. In one day, they killed 2,000 people, including civilians, in Al-Fashir. On that day, they killed 450 people in Al-Fashir Saudi Maternity Hospital, and on that day, they killed almost 300 people in Children's Hospital of Al-Fashir. And on that day, everyone who tried to leave Al-Fashir was killed, execution type, at that burn. But this is not a new thing. It's actually a recurring pattern. That actually is the exact modus operandi. Just they did it at this time very systematically, very, prepared for, and they executed the way they liked, ignoring every call for restraint and regarding civilians' life. And he said that bloodstains on the ground of Al-Fashir have been photographed from space. but the stance, but not on the records of the international community, are far less visible, but not less damaging. Too much pretense and performance, but far less action. So this is what the chief of the UN Human Rights has reported to the meeting there. And Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, in his remarks about what's happening in Sudan after al-Fashir, mentioned that one of the problems is that the RSF does not honor agreement. So that one of the major problem in how to deal with the RSF. They can actually talk and they can say good words and promises, but that has been their way of doing things. Just they don't honor agreements. And the level of malnutrition is unprecedented, never recorded before in recent history. And the number of people arriving at the refugee camps, and this is very dangerous, were far less than expected. I mean, organizations working at refugee camps, internal displacement camps, were reporting to the US government that the number of people that they were expecting after the fall of al-Fashir was much less than they were, the number of people who arrived there were much less than they were expecting. And that could mean that either they were dead or they were too weak to walk to safety places. That should be very alarming to everyone. So this is what happened in al-Fashir, and in my mind, actually, it fulfills the criteria of a weaponized famine. It has been there for a long time. The ramifications for the people, as individuals, for the families, for the community of al-Fashir are devastating, and for the city itself. And it fulfills actually if one can say, why this? Why is it so brutal? Why is it so, unhumane? One can draw a conclusion that it was meant to be like that in order for people to move away from their city or from their region. And that actually, to me, means demographic change. And that's what had happened now in al-Fashir. Now in al-Fashir is a city of ghosts, no people there. And those who were there, and they were, I'm sure they're living under tremendous pressure. And before I close my remarks, I would like to thank again the PSA and the South African Muslim community in general for them being support based and for them being very keen to know about what is really happening and what has happened in Sudan and what's really happening now. Regarding what one can appeal for, we actually appeal for more attention. We need to talk more about Sudan. It should never actually fall off the radar, because with continued pressure from the grassroots and from the grassroots organizations like the PSA and other organizations, more attention will be directed towards the issues, the real issues there, and it will give us actually more time to really to clear that confusion about the real issue in Sudan. As I said earlier, we do not see what's happening in Sudan as a simple power struggle between two generals. We see it as aggression against the country that is really being documented all over the places, and now all the world around is quite aware of it, that the role of the UAE in supporting the Janjaweed, in supplying them with the latest technologically advanced weapons, including drones, including tanks, including everything, and not that only, but also to defend them at organizations like the UN, and everyone, I mean, would remember, or if was how the UN, the UAE ambassador at the UN was actually defending the RSF there, preventing everything to every decision to be made against the RSF and the UN. So the role of UAE is central in the continuation of the suffering of Sudanese. Thank you.
Dr. Bashir, thank you so much for your contribution and for highlighting, the harrowing consequences of the war. And as we always like to emphasize, it's the people on the ground that suffer while the politicians fight or the external actors, interfere. What we do want to do now is we have very little time left. Let us move on to the issues of justice. And let's introduce our next guest, Dr. Fareid, Amgad Fareid. Please give us some understanding of to what extent can we really expect some form of justice to be meted out, considering the abuses on both sides by the RSF and the SAF. Dr. Fareid Amgad, are you still with us?
Mariam, Kabiru really wants to say something. I don't know what's it about. Kabiru?
Okay, sure. Please go ahead.
Your hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you. Greeting all.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Honorable Kabiru Husseini, and I am a state party chairman of a political party in the northern part of Nigeria. I am from the northern part of Nigeria. Last month, September, there was there was some American lawmakers and some television hosts and other political hostlers began a nasty and forceful campaign that there was a Christian genocide against Nigerians. So as a result of that, the situation became worrisome. Some of the media station has escalated the issue to the extent that it brings the attention of the nationals, some of the international communities. So,
Kabiru, can I stop you? I know that's an important issue, and we certainly can discuss it. But can we complete our program on Sudan and then come back to you if there is time at the end, or you can put a note in the chat room, and we can have your note in the chat room. Is that okay?
No problem. Yes, it's okay then. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Nazim. I see that Dr. Fareid Amgad is not with us anymore. Perhaps we can go then to a roundup, or if there are pressing questions directly related to the Sudan issue, please go ahead from our participants. Please put your questions out there.
Okay, and any questions? Comments as well? None? Okay. I think it is a learning experience today for everyone, Mariam. Maybe we just round off with final comments and your closure.
Sure, no problem. Just perhaps we could ask someone from the PSA who is involved in the demonstration tomorrow outside the UAE, just to let people know what exactly is going on, just before we close up. Could Shamim or Comrade Feroza please assist us with that?
I think before that, Mariam, if you just look at the chat, there's a question there and some comments.
The question is, Is there any involvement of the Wagner Group in Sudan? Dr. Bashir or Ramadan, any of our guests?
Sorry, which group?
Wagner. You know, the group
Wagner?
that, yeah, they were...
The Russian military group.
Oh, yes, Wagner. I don't have statistics, but I think this Wagner group was involved in the first stage of attack on Khartoum, but there was no mention of it so far. After the involvement of this from Colombia, mercenaries from Colombia. We got mercenaries from many neighboring African countries who took part. But I think mostly the fighters come from West Africa, especially from the Bedouin Arabs. And I would like to take this opportunity to clear this word Arab. In Sudan, when you say Arab, it mostly means somebody from the Bedouin. And in the context of Western Sudan, Arabs are the Bedouins who claim ancestry to Arabia. Although nobody could establish when this ancestry started, but anyway, they don't have their own local language other than Arabic, and they are hardly distinguishable between other groups. Maybe there are some other likeFor, Zagawa, and Masalit, and other. These are they trace their ancestry to African. So from that perspective, they say Africans and Arabs. But the context of Arab in Sudan does in any way mean like how you say whites and blacks in South Africa. This is what sometimes politicians confuse. So the word Arab means Bedouin, people who live in the rural areas, and they don't have any language other than Arabic. This is what it means. But in the context of Darfur, the Bedouins who come from Niger and West Africa are the ones who are heavily involved, and they are trying to wipe off the people of the land in order to take over their land, as I mentioned, Dr. Bashir. I would like to have a last comment, if you may allow me, Sister Mariam. Can I do that?
Go ahead. Just can we make it a bit quick? Yes.
Okay. There is a talk at the moment that the African Union wants to get involved in order to lead the peace process. Now, if the African Union comes with the same mentality of two factions or two parties into the conflict, I don't think they get anywhere, because they will find the entire Sudanese people standing on the one side with the army, and they will find these mercenaries along the side of RSF. And it is very difficult and very complicated. The only thing the African Union need to do is to give a very clear message to the United Arab Emirates to stop funding rebellion movement. If that happened, the rebellion movement will, the militia will end automatically. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think participants have seen the poll there regarding whether boycotting the UAE as a tourist destination would help end the war. Perhaps this is a good point where we could discuss very shortly how we as the, South Africans and the PSA in particular, how we would be able to support the struggle. So from our panelists here, please give us some idea of what you would want to see us do in the next coming days and weeks. Dr. Bashir or Brother Ramadan, either of you could go ahead.
I think as all activists and human rights activists all around the world are becoming aware more and more of the role of the UAE as its central role in prolonging the suffering of the Sudanese people. Putting the UAE under the spotlight as the sponsor and the enabler of this Janjaweed groups I think is important. The UAE is portraying a face of humanity and happiness and other things at the expense of other people in Africa and that things, and by looting actually or having access to resources, and that flowery face of the UAE, I think for now that their main capital. So calling them out, blaming them and shaming them would be actually important. And it's also raised awareness of governments and organizations like the AU and other organizations in the region to become more aware of the damaging role that the UAE is playing. As for boycotting, I think it's a good practical way of let them feel some hurt. But if it doesn't really become an international movement, I don't think it will achieve what people would need. So for us, we should not really allow this role of them go unrecognized and not unhighlighted. It should be put up in the agenda of every country and every organization. Thank you.
Thank you. A final word from Brother Mekki. I see you had your hand raised. Could we have your comments, please?
Actually, we have two things: the demonstration in front of a UAE embassy, and that should be followed by publication and news and articles and photos, especially the photos that putting UAE and Israel in the same level, because it's military alliance. You don't need to tell any other story. It has been confirmed by both sides. Agreement on drones, military drones manufacturing, that killing the Palestinians, children. And the sources are clear. Think tanks, study centers in Washington, D.C., Deutsche Welle, and others. And in the Palestine, the Ramallah Institute that I mentioned. That is very important because people, they should understand, unfortunately, the people of the Emirate are Arab people, Muslim people. They have mostly Sunnah, they have Shia. But unfortunately, it has been planned to hijack the ruling regimes in Arab countries, and more deeply and specifically happened in UAE, and we don't follow that. We didn't follow that till we reach a point that UAE is occupying part of Yemen and pushing the Janjaweed and the Bedouins and the nomads to genocide the people of the land in Darfur. That happened through UAE weapons and money, and more worse, the justification and the misleading and the misinformation all over the world. Regarding the boycotting UAE as a destination, I trust that you in South Africa, you know how, you know your evaluation. This is, frankly speaking, this is my first time to see these suggestions. Last time I visited South Africa, that was, I think, before 6 years, 7 years. But I do believe that the people in South Africa, they know what to do, and they know good ideas about what to do. But for me, the demonstration and the changing the mentality, that is very important. And we hope that the Arab people and the Muslim people to understand we have nothing wrong or bad intention with the people of the UAE. It is the regime that completely hijacked by Israel.
Thank you so much, Brother Mekki. I think we've come to the end of the program, and we'd like to thank everyone. It's been a wonderful information session where we've looked at the evolution of the RSF starting from 2003 as a Janjaweed movement, basically occupying a space where the state was non-existent or was being manipulated as a militia force. Moving on then to understanding what the role of the UAE is with regard to Israel and its alliance, looking at the 4 levels of cooperation of which UAE is at the top with Israel. And then we've discussed the humanitarian issue, looking specifically at whether or not it is a weaponized famine, and Dr. Bashir Osman has very eloquently allowed us to understand that this is certainly a case of weaponized famine, but also something that was called out by the UN more than 20 times. So what this suggests is that we as civil society need to get our act together. Thank you to all our panelists, and we thank you for watching, and please do forward this recording and join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock outside the UAE Embassy in Pretoria.
Thank you.
شكرا
Thanks,
جزيلا
everyone.
مريم. السلام
شكرا.
عليكم everyone.
Wa alaikum salam. Strength to
And we
everyone.
take